Hello everybody and welcome back to iCommand. This is TV Boy and I want to go over a recent announcement we just made for IACP Skirmish. This was called a prelude to Season 10 balance updates for July 2024. This was released last Friday on June 29th, June 28th. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to make a video about it, but I did want to make one just so that people who only watch the channel are aware of what's going on with IACP. So for those that didn't know, we are actually in full swing for Season 10 spoiler articles. I'm going to make a video going over some of the spoilers from Season 10, but I do feel like it is important to talk about the balance changes that come along with a new season. So after we go through a competitive segment, players have played league games and tournament games with the cards without any changes for several months. We assess how things are going in the competitive scene and we make balance updates as we feel are needed. And this is the kind of the latest round of balance updates from the results of the March through June competitive play season. So let's talk about it. First, before we get into that, I want to thank everybody for liking and subscribing. If you're not subscribed, please. It really helps out the channel. Also helps when you watch more than one video at a time or back to back. So make sure you click on another video after you watch this one. Watch one of our games, game log reviews, or even some campaign content I put out. So for this announcement, this includes the thanking our pre-playtesting players. So this was, let's see, how many are there? 4, 5, 9 of you guys that helped us, answered our call looking for volunteers to help give feedback and playtest the cards from Season 10 before they were released. So we had about 4 weeks of that, and super helpful. I'm really happy with the way it went, with how it was organized by our other steering committee members, and I think it really improved the quality of the Season 10 cards above and beyond what we could have put out with just our own knowledge and testing internally. So thank you to those guys. I've got them listed out here in the article. We've got Bacon Second, Clooney the Mad, Destruct One, Destructor, J-Jax, Pwned, Rivian, Soul Ryan, and Turu. Thank you guys so much for your help. And now we're going to move on to the balance changes. These balance changes that I'm going to show you guys here, this was not in the purview of the pre-playtesting players, the PPP. We shared it with them ahead of time just to get their eyes on it and get some pre-release feedback, so in case we didn't think of something, but they actually didn't see the full. We actually went back on some of the changes we shared with them originally. So their job was to test the Season 10 cards, not to test these updates. So I just want to clarify that going forward. Okay, so the first change, we've got 4 cards that were changed for going into Season 10. The first of which is one that I'm sure if you guys have been watching the channel, you're probably not shocked to see this, but the Rancor is getting an update. Getting a pretty small one in my opinion actually, but a significant change nonetheless. The Rancor, which originally had 2 black dice with no penalty on its defenses, is going to be changed now to have 1 black dice but with a +1 block, replacing the second black die. So I'm going to go into the stats real quick here. So looking at just the stats from our 4 tournaments that we had, our 4 Vassal tournaments, unfortunately I have not had time to go through all the league and extra game logs that we've gotten yet and input them into the data, but I did finish putting in the stats from the tournaments, including the first 2 rounds of the June tournament. While we were looking at these updates, Rancors were 15% meta share. They had 8 lists out of the 4 tournaments, which averaged between 14 and 16 players. 8 unique lists that were played with Rancors. So there were generally 2 to 3 Rancor lists in a tournament, at least for April, May, and June. I don't think there were any in the March tournament where we had 10 players. And Rancors had a win rate of 77.27%, which is extremely high. And this is excluding mirror matches. with mirror match. There was one Rancor mirror match that brought the win rate to 75% with mirror matches, but this is some of the highest win rate we've seen for this many games, with 24 matches played in the tournament games. In the past, when we've had cards that are problems that needed to be changed, they generally are in the high 60s, and this is high 70s. Like Beskar Spear Mandalorian was in like 63% win rate, stayed around there before we had to get rid of him. The Royal Guards in Season 3 were in about 66-67% win rate. So the Rancor win rate very high. It was an issue that needed to be addressed. And I want to talk about the change itself and why the change was specifically made, and then I want to talk about our jobs as the steering committee and as stewards of the metagame. So the Rancor's issue was, and this was a long time coming, and I want to say that, we don't like changing older cards from older seasons. We like to think that if the cards were play tested and approved in an older season, then they were fine and balanced in that season, and that it must have been a new issue, something new that came along that upended their balance. But in this case, we thought, well, that must have been the elite officers that did that. But as we kept watching the tournament results unfold, we saw Rancors without elite officers were creating a lot of problems from more than one player. It wasn't just one player that was playing the list. Multiple players picked it up, and it was doing very well, and also just people were telling us it's very unfun to play against. So the issue was that the damage recovery from both Voracious, from cards like Apex Predator, and then from the Skirmish upgrade attachment Feeding Frenzy, which gives them a surge to recover 2 damage. It just, in combination with their double black dice, anytime they roll 4 or 5 blocks on the double black die, any damage that you do to them then just gets undone by either the recover 2 from Voracious or a surge to recover from one of their many, many attacks that they can make with things like Pummel, Ferocity, Parting Blow. There's so many ways to give them so many attacks that the surge for recover 2 from Feeding Frenzy was creating a problem. But specifically, it was a problem because of how hard it was to deal damage to them through their double black die, through things like Survival Instincts, which gives them +1 block, +1 evade, things like Savage Vigor, which reduces a big attack to get through their 2 black dice down to 2 dice and makes it pretty much almost like an on the lam for Rancors because of how high their defenses are. So we realized that the smallest change we can make to really help deal with that problem was to make it so that their defense spikes cannot spike above 4 blocks. And to make 4 blocks much harder to get to. So that's why they have now 1 black die instead of 2, but they gave them +1 block. They now have a 1 in 6 chance to roll 4 blocks, or to have 4 blocks on the dice, but no longer are they going to be getting 4 or 5 blocks as the average. So that was the reason for changing their defenses specifically. There was a lot of other changes we could have made to the Rancors that we didn't. We talked about making them unique. We talked about increasing their cost. In fact, their cost was supposed to originally be 10, but there was an error, and they got put out with cost 9 instead, because they used to be cost 9. And when we playtested them, they were okay at 9. We felt like we could leave it, and we didn't want to raise it to 10 after the fact. But we don't want to raise it to 10 now, because raising the cost will destroy or make it much harder to list build with them. We don't want to have players who have been dedicating a lot of time to playing with the lists that involve Rancors having to go back and completely redo their list and have to cut cards from their list. That's really hard. So when we make nerfs like this, we try to do it in a way that is as disruptive or as little disruptive as possible to existing lists. That's why we didn't want to make them. We pushed back against making them unique, because that would obviously kill double Rancors, even though it would make them more balanced. we could have changed crippling blow or just removed it to deal with the stun that they deal out, which is problematic for a lot of melee lists when they attack you with reach. Removing the recover from voracious, but we realized that was not going to do enough with feeding frenzy in the picture. So why are we changing rancors after only one season of them being a problem? Because they weren't really problems in previous seasons. These guys came out in season 7. We went through season 7 and season 8 with rancors, double rancors. We had one player who was really dedicated to using them. We had a couple players who would pick them up sporadically during those 2 seasons. I don't think they ever won a tournament during those 2 seasons. They were doing really well in league play though, and it's not like we didn't get complaints about them, by the way, during season 7 and season 8. People who played against them told us, like, these were frustrating to play against because of all the things they do, because of the fact that they're massive. So they block, they're very disruptive to positioning. They push your figures off of objectives. They block line of sight to support figures that you could try to take out. And then they're just very tanky and also very fast because of Beast Tamer. So why are we doing this now? Well, we've had our tournament series, and since they were played since April, where we had 3 Rancor lists just suddenly appear, players have gotten a lot more exposure to them, and they also cut off a lot of list building avenues. So I heard it was this when we put this out on the Discord. There was discussion from people who didn't want the Rancors changed. Well, why don't we just figure out how to counter Rancors? Why don't we look for counter play and counter list building, and counter them naturally within the metagame instead of just going to change them after one season of them being a problem? There's a couple problems with that. First of all, you restrain list building for players when you do that, right? If rancors are now the fun police, where, okay, I can't play this fun list that I wanted to play that was kind of competitive. I can't play it because it loses to rancors. Well, that sucks. It's like, that's not fun for people who want to play what they want to play. That means rancors are warping the metagame around them, literally. Even if, like, okay, fine, there's these 3 lists that 2 of them have like a 55-45 against rancors, and one of them has like a 65-35 or something, or even a 70-30. Like, okay, so now you either have to play rancors or play one of those 3 lists. Like, that's not a healthy format. That's not a healthy game that we want to have. The whole point of IACP is to have so much more list diversity. We want to have people be able to play all the different cards, all the different characters that they like. We don't want the game to just boil down to, well, I have to play stuff that can beat rancors because otherwise I lose to rancors. That's not the kind of game we want. Second, even if there are lists that counter rancors, they were very unfun to play against regardless. There's just something about the figures and the list that makes it difficult to play against, or very frustrating. You know, when you are dealing 2 damage to them every attack with your 4 dice attack because of their defenses and all their defensive tech, and then they recover that off, and then some with recover abilities. Even if you are winning the game against them, that's just we've found from players that having lists that do that basically stall out the damage race and then in their favor, it's frustrating to play against that. And then we've had people comment, in the comments of this, was like, thank you, like, I don't know how much longer I could have gone in this meta where I have to be able to beat rancors. I have to play against rancors. I will say this, like, I think we waited the exact right amount of time to let the Rancors run their course. We let the players who wanted to play Rancors get their tournament wins in, or get their tournament results in for themselves. And this is the time where it's time to make changes, right? We've said that in the past. Like, new season means this is where we make updates to cards. And I think that, the tournament season was 4 months. We had Rancors as part of that for 3 months, plus the first month. I mean, the first month we had a lot of people playing Rancors in League, in the asynchronous League, and in pickup games online. And then they started appearing in tournaments for 3 months, April, May, and June. I think that's about as long as we can bear to force players to deal with a problematic list without addressing it. I think that one of the huge missteps that FFG made when they were managing the skirmish game was letting problematic lists go on for too long. There would be an obvious problem. People would be like, look, this is an obvious problem. This is what happened with Spectre Cell, right? Spectre Cell came out in August 2018. It went unaddressed after dominating store championships and regionals for months and months. It went unaddressed for over 6 months into Worlds, March 2019, unchanged, unaddressed. Obvious problem, they didn't fix it. The game hemorrhaged players because people were just tired of playing against Spectre Cell. It wasn't fun to play against, and it was everywhere. If you wanted to win, you had to play it. And we don't want to do that to our players. And I don't think we don't have the player base to even afford that. We can't bleed players for 6 months because we don't do anything about Rancors, and we say, hey, you guys got to figure it out. You guys got to counter Rancors. Like, people don't want to do that. There's other games people could be playing that are more fun, that are more balanced than a game where everything is warping around this one list because it's a problem. So I hope that the people who are upset by this change can look at things more objectively and look at how this is important and necessary for the health of the game to keep what players we have from leaving. Because players will leave if we make people endure this for more than 3 months, I think. Like, if we made this go on for another whole season, another 6 months, right? A season is 6 months. Even if we made people go through this for 2 more months, without addressing it, it would have been very bad. And I also want to say, like, this is not a very big change. I actually fear that this is not going to be enough of a change. I have dedicated myself for the sake of the folks who, I understand that it hurts to have a card that you play get nerfed, get targeted by the powers that be that are calling the shots in the game above what you can call. I totally get that. That's why I told the Rancor players on Discord, you know what? For you guys, I'm going to play Rancors now so that everyone can see that they are still playable and they are still good. They're just not as broken as they were in their original iteration. Because the natural reaction for people when they're playing a card for a while and then it gets nerfed is they're going to jump ship, right? Why would I play this card? It's worse than it was when I played it before. Even if it's balanced, even if it's like actually still competitive, it's just slightly worse. People are going to jump off of it because it's worse than what they were used to. So I've said I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to play Rancors for the next month, and I'm going to have to study some of Herbie's videos to see how he plays it, because they're a high skill list, but they were problematic. So what was I saying? I was going to say this is a small change, but the fact that we made the change is what is important to people, because it shows our player base that we care and we're not just abandoning things to run their course and be the way they are. We're not going to just let things lie. We're showing them that we are actively managing this game, that we are listening and we're watching, and that players should have hope. Because that's the worst thing, right? Is if you go through 3 months playing against a list that you think is ultimately unfair, which is what a lot of players express to us, both privately and in the Discord and in voice chat. When you go through that, by the way, that includes people who are using the Rancors. Like it's one thing for somebody to be playing a list and be like, this list is fine and balanced. I think it's fine. When I had players who were using Rancors and winning tournaments and winning lots of games with them, or winning lots of, I don't think they won a tournament, but winning lots of games with these figures, saying these are not fair or fun to my opponents, and that's a big deal for me. So what was I saying? Yeah, when we have players who have to go through 3 months of this, having this in the meta, having to deal with this and persist against this, something that feels very unfair. If they then, when it comes time for there are scheduled changes and we're like, no changes, we're not going to do anything, that kills the hope of the player base, right? That shows that like no changes, then I gotta wait. We're gonna go through another 5-6 months till the next scheduled changes, and there's nothing. Like nothing has gotten better. And I think you have to show players. We have to show players that we're managing the game, that we care, and that we're not going to let something that is a clear problem persist unchecked and unanswered. But we also had I feel like we had a conservative hand with this. I feel like we didn't go all out. We didn't destroy Rancors. We didn't. We kept them as competitive, and we pretty much kept them almost exactly the same. We just slightly toned down their defense so you can actually deal more damage to them than they recover, which it might actually not be the case. So I'm sorry, I'm ranting a little bit on Rancors. I wanted to get my feelings out about that, about the Rancor change, and so hopefully folks who are upset by it can try to see the necessity of it, and you can try to see that, they're still good and they're worth playing. And I hope people who have done well with Rancors will continue to play them and enjoy them and win with them, because I think you can definitely still win with Rancors in this state. Alright, let's move on. We've got a few more cards to talk about, and I'm not going to go into as much. That was kind of my my rant for all these changes and how we manage the format. The next change was a much more minor change, but it is a change that a lot of people have been asking for. It's not something that's been problematic per se, but it is something that people have said this should change. And that is the Clan of Two and the Child Companion. The Clan of Two now has had text added that says the Child Companion is not counted for purposes of control while incapacitated. So for those that don't know, this is an attachment that we made back in Season 4, and it gives you the Child Companion, which is a companion figure that can, for a special action, recover 1 damage from an adjacent figure and remove a condition from it. It can also, whenever it's being attacked or whenever its base figure is being attacked, can incapacitate itself to weaken the attacker and make the attacker remove 1 of their dice. And what incapacitated is something we brought in from campaign, which had never been used in skirmish. It has very kind of confusing rules, but basically, once a figure is incapacitated, it can no longer use any of its abilities, it cannot suffer damage, and it cannot take any actions or activate. Actually, I know maybe it can activate. I don't know how that works, but it can't take any actions. The problem is that we wanted the child to be able to account for control, because we just didn't want that extra text on the Clan of Two card. But the problem is once the child is incapacitated, there's nothing you can do to it. You can't kill it. You can't affect it with ability, so you can't push it. So that made it very, very powerful as an objective controlling piece. Like, you could have your base figure hide back in cover, and then the Child Companion be on an adjacent space to that figure on an objective, controlling an objective, and be completely risk-free. So that's why we've added this change, and players were very supportive of changing this card, even though it had been approved for a long time. So now, while the child is incapacitated, it cannot control objectives. So next changes are for the Season 9 cards that were on continued testing status. So these cards, the 2 cards that got changed based on feedback we got from players during the competitive season, just what we want to see change. Not all the cards got changed, so we still have Meditation, Ewoks, New Hope, You Will Not Deny Me, which is the 5th Brother command card, and then Fennec Shan's command card, Dangerous Prey. They may get changes going into the middle of Season 10 once the Season 10 cards have kind of found their footing and have settled down. We might try some changes to those cards if we need to. But specifically for Season 9 cards, the Elite Imperial Officer has gotten changes. It no longer has the Cower ability, and it can only target Imperial figures with Executive Order. So we talked about the Rancor. We talked about how Elite Officers shook things up for the Rancor with General's ranks, giving them 2 extra movement points whenever you order a Rancor. By bringing Rancors into Empire with Temporary Alliance, it was creating a very powerful list of Imperial Officer swarms with 2 Rancors with Temporary Alliance and General's ranks, plus Zillow Technique and extra armor was making them really tanky. And Executive Order, being able to move them effectively 6 spaces, was super powerful and was kind of an unaccounted for combination. And it's something that we didn't really like. The changes to the Rancor was intended to keep the Scum Rancor list still powerful and still intact, but we didn't like this officer list at all, and we felt that it was even more problematic than Rancors because of how much extra movement officers give the Rancors compared to something like Beast Tamer, which just gives them an extra 4 movement points. Officers, you can move with a regular officer and an elite officer. You're moving your Rancor 10 spaces before it activates. And then you can do that again for your second Rancor, and that's too much. So we've changed the elite officer so you can only target Imperial figures with it. We wanted it to still be able to do stuff like that with ATSTs and ATDPs with General's ranks. For now, we're monitoring that as well. And then Cower was a problem on the elite officers because of how much health they had, plus the white dice. With 6 health, we realized, and it was pointed out to us by a lot of players, 6 health is very hard to one-shot kill with Zillow Technique in the back, adding +1 defense when needed. So it's very often you're going to have to commit 2 attacks to kill an elite officer, which is fine because that's what's kind of standard for a 4-point figure. The problem is that with Cower added to it with a white dice, that means your opponent gets to roll 4 white dice across those 2 attacks to fish for a dodge, and it makes it very likely to dodge one of the 2, which then forces a 3rd attack, and that is definitely a problem for a figure that can attack way above its pay grade with its Executive Order ability. So we want these to be able to defeat it consistently in 2 attacks. So we realized removing Cower was an important part of that. And then finally, there's a change to Fennec Shand. Fennec has gone from 5 speed to 4. And basically, this was kind of the change we realized needed to happen. It was too easy to have Fennec hang back really safely. First of all, 5 speed means she can double move 10 and get to very far off locations on the map that are hard to reach but have good line of sight options with the speed 5. So once she's there, being speed 5 means she can find her way to spots on the map that have line of sight from very far away because her range is huge. It also makes it a lot easier for her to break away when she's being attacked, to either run away or to move back far enough to get that sharpshooter ability, so she's focused on her attack. So we found everything else we thought of doing, we'd already nerfed her stats in Season 9, so we didn't want to nerf her stats any more than that. So going from speed 5 to speed 4 we felt would help fix some of the annoying parts of her play pattern of being so hard to get to, so hard to commit to get that bounty, which is a very important part of her balancing, is the fact that she gives up more VPs than she's worth. But if you can never get to her because she's so fast and so easy to slip away, then that bounty doesn't really matter at all. So far we've heard good feedback from this, that going down to speed 4 has made her a lot less annoying to deal with, but she's still got a great attack and great stats for 5 points. So that's Fennec. So that's the 4 changes. I'm going to be making videos talking about Season 10, but I find it's important to make sure we get this out to players before the new cards come out, just so that players know what the format's going to look like. We've also got another map, a new map rotation that's going to be coming out on July 3rd, Wednesday, so we'll be talking about that as well. That's the changes. Let me know in the comments what do you guys think about these changes. Have you been playing IACP? Have you been interested? Do you play IACP at home casually? And have you guys played Rancors in your games or any of these other cards? And let me know what you think about the changes and what you're excited to see for Season 10. Thanks everybody for watching. Well, catch you for the next video.